We've just seen how to create a cube, and we've also seen that I had to troubleshoot an issue while browsing a cube. Turned out that I couldn't browse any cube because somehow, should have been me, but it wasn't, somehow someone had configured the SSAS services to run under a wrong account, an account that did not have rights that it needed. What I've done now is I've gone into the configuration manager and I've corrected it, and I'm going to use one of my AdventureWorks cubes to browse to show you how it works. So let's go ahead and go back to my Management Studio. Now that it's been deployed and so on. I'm going to use not the database engine, but I'm going to drop down to Analysis Services. It's then going to give me Daniel AI as my selection. I'm going to connect. Once I connect and I see a green arrowhead by the database symbol, there it is, that Analysis Services. I'm going to click Databases, and notice I've got an AdventureWorks DW 2012 multidimensional cube deployed. I'm going to go look at my cubes, and I'm going to go ahead and right-click on a cube and choose Browse. Because this cube has already been processed and deployed, it browsed very easily, and it opens up my browser. If I go here and say Process, it's going to give me the same dialog we saw that failed, only this time, when I click OK, it goes through the measures. Okay, it's building the work orders, finishes building in my indexes and my partitions, gives me a list of what it's doing as it's going through the process. And the process succeeded. I can now close it. And that means that I can now browse this cube. I'm going to go ahead and unpin this so we have a little more room to work with the browser. If I expand, for example, let's just use, I don't know. Here's its KPIs. I can actually say growth in the customer base, and I click on that, expanding it. I've got the value, the goal, and the status. Let me pull this out here, and look at that. I can actually take a look at the real values that are in this calculated measure. If I want to get rid of it, I can just say, well, I want to remove that. I don't want that in there anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that, not choose that out of my measure. Take all those calculated members out of there, okay, for that KPI. I can also, these are my measure groups, I can also click on this ellipse, which will give me a cube from the list that we have. These are our cubes that are already made. Channel sales, direct sales, finance, mind customers, sales summary, and then I can go browse another cube if I wish. Here's my measured groups. If I were to go, let's go collapse these. If I were to say, let's do the date, and I'm going to just drag this out here, and I select a dimension, and I go to date, okay? It's now going to show me which hierarchy I should use. Okay, what am I looking for? Weeks, months, years? And I'm building a way to browse the data, okay, in the cube. You can actually take that dimension. I can take that dimension out, okay? Whatever I want to do, I can also take each of these members out. All right, I'm going to take off the auto execute, and I took off the show empty cells, so I don't want to see that. I can add a member. do many different things, okay? So this is showing my dimensions. I can actually select a dimension, and let's go ahead and take date. There you go. And we're going to choose which hierarchy from date, operator, filter expression, parameter. All these things are deals we can choose. So I'm going to take the date dimension. I'm going to take delivery date, okay, and I'm going to add another dimension where I'm going to choose order date. Get down here. Delivery date, and well, we can just use ship date for right now. All right. Now, the hierarchy I'm concerned about is basically, I want to stretch this out. And now if I drop down and look at hierarchy, ship date calendar, ship date quarter, ship date month, let's go ahead and go down to, and these are different orders that they are in their hierarchy. And this little set of squares like this means that these are attributes that we are sorting by, and these are actual hierarchies that we're using. Okay, so if I were to go ship date calendar quarter year, how about ship date day name? Okay, and the operator equals, see, this is where I'm building my query, equals all fields. All periods. And then down here I can choose a parameter if there's one created that I can use for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do where ship date equals all periods. Now I'm going to go back and look at delivery date. Okay. I'm going to select that hierarchy, and delivery date equals name, and I'm going to go again equals all periods. Okay. And then I'm going to choose my date. And what I want this time is I want to actually have date. And my operator is going to be equal, and my expression again is going to be all periods. This is going to cover years and years and years. Okay, I'm going to say okay. Now I've got all this date stuff, ship date, delivery date, all this good thing, but I don't have what? I don't have anything that would give me a reference to my products or my orders or anything else like that. So what I might want to do is select a dimension, and I might select, for example, let's look at sales summary order details right here. All right, and we're going to go down and choose the hierarchy and choose all the sales orders this time. And we're actually going to go over here and say equals, and I'm going to choose my filter. And if I expand this, it's going to give me all these sales orders. I'm going to say every one of them. Huge, huge. Now what I have to do is I want to take all these out. Just drag them out and drop them. No big deal. Okay. Now, what am I going to do with my measures? Now, what I want to do is I've got all these conditions above. Okay, I'm in design mode. If I take it out of design mode, it shows me how I would write an MDX query. This is really important to remember, because if you want to alter the query, but you're not sure of the syntax, you can start with this, copy and paste this, and actually use this in the Management Studio for an MDX type query, and you have good starting points in all your object names and everything else. Okay? So if I execute this query here, let me focus on it. There are no, I don't believe, yeah, there is a parameter there that's going to have to be provided, but I'm not going to create a new one there, okay? But this will allow me to actually execute a MDX query and give me the returns that I want to look for. Now, I've got an awful lot of stuff in here. I'm doing a select on everything, and even though I've executed it, it's going to take a long time to run. What I now do with this, watch this query change as I do this. As I expand the customer, and I take this particular attribute and I say, I want to have that attribute in there as well. So I'm going to go back to design mode, and I'm going to expand my customer, and I'm going to say, this is something I want to do. So I don't have any rows found yet because I'm executing for customer, and I'm going to use account, okay, an account number, and then I want to set up a measure, and I'm going to go for sales orders and order count. All righty, and it's executing right now. Again, I have a lot of things up here in my conditions, so I'm going to get returned a huge amount of stuff. Okay, so let's open up this. This is my customer, their account numbers. Notice I'm starting with Allen, Hayes, and Zhang. And this is a lot of randomly generated data, but in a real database, this would be showing me all kinds of different orders that have been completed, basically exposing the details by using the measure from the measure group. So what is all this stuff up here? What am I doing with these things? Okay, these are actually setting up filtering conditions that I want to make sure work on the dimensions as I run the query. In this case, my query doesn't really use any of those, but what I would normally do is go into, for example, ship date, and set up a formula, an expression here, where I would actually say, okay, let's go ahead and use all these, but let's go ahead and not say necessarily equal. Let's just pick one of them and make that do the report as I've seen on one day. So right now, if we take a look at this query, okay, I go down to the bottom. There we go. Order count is 31,455. Uncheck, and I'm going to say Monday, and I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to execute the query. Giving it a minute. Now we only, instead of 31,000 orders, we only have 4,241. Why? Because I set this particular filter to equal, right, the ship date equals Monday. There were 4,241 orders shipped on Monday. See how that works? I can browse the cube and look at the data as it compares to itself. I can set up the requirements and hierarchies that I want to navigate up here. Now, if I kill this design pane and I go back to this, I can still run this query, okay? But that's just parsing. That's just checking it out. And it's executing right now. And I get the 4,241. See how that works? Okay, can browse. Now, we explained what a hierarchy was. We also explained that a measure is exposing the dimensions of the hierarchy. We can choose what language we want to use as long as we've got others. We can actually take this, copy it, and take a look at how it's written, make it change, do what we want to do with it. But all this is available through AdventureWorks, SQL Server Management Studio. It's also available in Visual Studio through the business data tools or the SQL data tools. Okay, same interface, same everything. All right, a little bit different. I'm sorry, there's a few buttons that are a little different, and up here it's all different. I could also choose a new query, and if you notice, I can choose a regular T-SQL, an MDX, an DMX, and an XMLA query type for this. DMX is a data mining, right? MDX is multidimensional. And XMLA is a way to return everything into an XML type document and navigate it that way. We're not going to talk about that this time. All right, let me go ahead and minimize this, and let's move on with what we're doing. Now let's talk about cube security, okay? In the security model, we actually use Windows authentication. It gives us our permissions based on the membership of our roles. In other words, it's concerned about our principal. Permissions can be applied to databases, data sources, dimensions, individual dimension members, and individual cells. So the granularity of permissions inside SSAS is great. We can go all the way down to the individual cell. We can let everybody drill down that far and then say, I'm sorry, you can't see this data. Okay? It's all controlled by Windows authentication. When we add members to the server role is the only role at the server level. You cannot change server role permissions, nor can you change the role itself. It cannot be disabled. We're talking about SSAS specifically, SQL Server Analysis Services instances specifically. If I go and look at that right now, I can see, since I have SSAS open, I can actually go here and say, give me the Object Explorer, pin that open, and I can set security on those cubes. If I look at the roles, okay, there's nothing in there. But if I were to go ahead and say, give me a new role, I could work on that. If I go up here to the entire instance, I collapse the database, okay, assemblies. If I go down here and I say, I look at all the options that I have as far as register, policies, all these things can be applied as well. It has complete security granularity. So in my assemblies, I can actually, this is for CLR, different managed code or .NET assemblies that can be used within SQL. A lot of them deal with Excel services, so we can talk to Excel services easily. Okay, and then going here, we will see that under the data sources, data source views, we have roles. And here we can actually say new role, and I can create a new role. I could say my role, which my role is probably a jelly roll. And now I can choose what its permissions are. So I'm going to give it full control. Woo-hoo. And the membership, is there anybody in that role? No, but I could add somebody. I could add Cindy. And I'm going to check the names and look at that. Daniel AI Cindy, I'm going to say OK. All right, data sources, that one. It's a good deal. It can read the definitions. Cubes, can process, do everything with it. Cell data, no cells are locked off from the admin. Dimensions, all the dimensions we have permissions on. And then the actual dimension data. Okay, and then I say okay. It then goes through, and guess what? It makes a mic roll. On the mic roll, I can go in the properties, and I can say, wait a minute, you know, I'm not sure I want to do this. I don't know if I want to let him do this. This is a lot of power. Okay, so what I can do is I say okay, and then I can right click and I can get rid of it. I can delete it if I want. I can also duplicate it, which means I can make another role and perhaps change values slightly, so it makes it easier when I have to set up roles. And I also can script it as a create to a new query editor window. So there we go, we have a new query. It's an XMLA query, like I say. We're going to use XML, and we're going to say, here's the database engine. Role ID is Mike role. Member is Cindy with a security identifier, and so on. Okay. If I want to change this just a little bit, I can say create, and then I'm going to say name instead of Mike's role. I'm going to say Mike role 2. Okay. I am going to execute this query. Isn't that great? I'll just highlight it all. And then I will hit executing the query. Still running. Errors in the metadata manager. The database role already exists. How about that? So what we need to do is change it up here some, and then we can actually create that. So database parent object, role ID, role. Okay. Okay, and let's try to execute it now. All right, so I'm going to highlight the whole query. And now what do we have? Role 2 element, line 12, column A35, namespace, engine cannot appear under envelope execute command. Well, you get the idea. You can actually massage that into creating your own new roles. But remember, I've got a role now. If I want to add a role, I can go new role, and I can do it that way, or I can output a script just like I was showing you. Okay. Alrighty, I'm going to minimize this again. We're going to go back. Database roles, you can change. You can create your own. That's what we were just doing. We were creating database roles. It was not the server access roles because we can't add or create server access roles. Those are locked. I decide on the access levels for the database roles. Then I put users into these roles, and I can create them using Management Studio or SQL Server data tools, depending on what I want to do. If I go back, just in case you want to see, may as well show you. We'll go back here, and what I'll do is I will connect to the instance of if I go to the, connect to the instance of the database role, database engine, and I'm going to go server name dot, and I'm going to connect. And when I go down here, I go to security, and I go to server roles and take a look. These server roles, I can't add a new server role. If I go new server role, it's going to say, what do you want? And this is server role, da 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 da, and I can actually set up the owner and so on. Okay? When I'm in the instance here, I don't even have the ability to see that. If I right click, like for example, where I opened server roles under security there, if I go ahead and say, well, I want to see the server roles here, I don't have that right, okay? If I go in here, I can actually set up in properties under security, I can add server administrator role. I can add people to it, but I can't change it, and I can't make another one. That's it, okay? That's the only thing I've got. That's what they're talking about in the slides. All right, so group the users into the roles, create the database roles, and then we can grant permissions to both the cubes and the data sources. Most users do not need data source permission. Cube permissions are either read or read write, and by default, when you have a cube permission defined, all the dimensions and everything contained inside that object are also affected by those positions, or permissions, I'm sorry. We can also create cells, and after we create cell permissions, we can then set what we want you to see after we create the cells. Read only, write, read contingent. What is read contingent? Well, it's allowing you to read, but only if you have the permission coming from a different role than the one you've defined this in. For example, it's very handy when I have salespeople, okay, and I have sales managers. I need to see all the documents the salespeople do, but there's a few cells and things that I should only see if I am in the sales manager's role as well as salesperson. Read contingent, okay? It's a cell permission. Okay, granting dimension and dimension data permissions by default, the cube grants read-only access to all the members and all the dimensions. Read-write will allow me to process the dimension, okay? Use MDX statements to specify the exact dimension members that we should apply permissions to. MDX statements, we have a whole section coming on how to use MDX and what is MDX. Multiple dimensional queries is what it stands for. And when we use MDX, we're actually navigating the hierarchy of the cube to find the individual cells that we're going to affect with our permissions and with the groups that are granted those permissions. So we can do that directly. If I want to test them, I can actually say security context, AdventureWorks Cube. I can use, please try to use this as a different user. And so it allows me to log in with the other user or the role that they should be in to see what they will see when they try to browse the cube or look at the data.